Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Customer Success Rants and Musings. My name is Rick Adams from practicalcsm.com. Today's topic is how to define our customers' outcomes. Now, I think that outcomes is something that people do struggle with. Customer success professionals do struggle with. So let's talk a little bit about defining outcomes, because if we don't define the outcome, if we're not clear what the outcome is, actually it can be very difficult to really help the customer, and perhaps even more critical, there's no way that we can measure the value that we're returning to prove that there is value in order to get the contract renewed, for example. So how do we do this? Well, I would say that there are 3 aspects to an outcome that means that it's clearly defined, and you can see them there: quality, quantity, and deadline. So if let's say we're talking to the customer and we say, well, what outcome do you need? It doesn't have to be done in using that word outcome. We can say anything we like. So you could say, what are your objectives? Or what goals do you need to hit? Or what's your target for this? Or any word that basically means what do you want to have happen? So we're asking them that question, what is it that you want to achieve from this? And they say, for the sake of argument, we need to increase our revenues. Well, that's a good start, but it's very hazy, isn't it? I mean, that's like, well, we've got a goal, but the goal is covered in fog, and I've got the ball, and I know that I need to kick it, but I've got no way of knowing which way the goal is. So, I'll just be randomly kicking the ball, hoping to score a goal, and that really is not very efficient. So what we want to do is we want to try and triangulate down, which is why we need these 3 different factors. So the first thing I would then say in this example is, well, that's great. Okay, so more revenues. So exactly where do these revenues need to come from? I'm trying to understand the quality of the revenues that they need. So, for example, it might be just generally revenues from anywhere is fine. Well, okay, well, that's fine. So the quality is any revenues will do. Maybe they actually are going to tell me something else. So maybe it's revenues from a particular department or a branch. Maybe it's revenues from a region. Maybe it's revenues from a product or a product portfolio, a product line. So, for example, I asked them, well, okay, so where do the revenues need to come from? And they say, well, yeah, good question. Actually, we intend to increase these revenues from sales of product X. We've just launched product X, and that's where the increase in revenues is going to come from. Great. So the quality now is increase in revenues from sales of product X. All right, great. Now let's move on to the quantity. Well, we've already got a direction in there, increased revenues, funnily enough. But then we need to know, well, how much? Because actually, if someone says, well, I need increased revenues, if I reach into my pocket and say, well, here's $1, have we just hit our target? Technically we have. In reality, I don't think that's very helpful. So we need to put a quantity on it. So my next consultative question is going to be, okay, great. So increase sales from product X to generate how much additional revenues? And that might be like a percentage increase, or it might be a number. So they might say, well, 25 millions or 250 millions or whatever, depending on the size of the company that we're dealing with. They might say, well, 25% increase over last year or something of that nature. So either way, it doesn't matter, percentage or an actual amount, but we need to know what it is. So for example, we need to increase our revenues from sales of product X, and we're looking for a 20% increase in revenues by the, sorry, I was just going on to do the deadline, which is the next and final part, which is, well, when do we need to see that happen? And that could be, for example, by the end of 2021 or within 3 years, or however they want to word it. But again, we want a specific endpoint. All right. So that's the third thing, the deadline, to triangulate and make it a really sort of 3D outcome. So a quality, what is it? A quantity, well, how much of it is needed? And a deadline, by when must we achieve that? Because without the deadline, actually, it's a sliding scale of how easy or difficult it is. Because the further away it is, the easier something is to achieve. The less time we've got to do it in, the harder it is. So we've got to understand when the deadline is in order to know what recommendations we're going to be making. To say, well, if that's your deadline, then these are our recommendations. So that's very important. This is my technique. This is what I use. I use it all the time. In reality, when I'm consulting with my customers about anything that is outcome related, it doesn't have to be customer success. It could be absolutely anything. And I use it in my personal life as well. It comes from a well-known concept, which is SMART objectives that you can see here. And SMART actually has 5 aspects. specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound. So you can go a little bit further and consider all 5 of those aspects if you want to, but at least get those 3 in: quality, quantity, and deadline. If you can get those and get them written down and then show that to the customer, say, is this correct? Have I got it right? Have them validate that's the outcome that we want, or these are the outcomes, because there may be multiples of them, then that is fantastic, because we've now got a line in the sand. That is what we're aiming at. And now we can talk to them about how we're going to achieve that. And by the way, of course, the fact that their outcomes are what requirements are X now doesn't mean it's always going to be X. So as we move forwards with the customer, every few months, perhaps, we're going to want to be checking, have you changed your requirements?